Hi, everyone. How are you today? Just got a little bit of technology going on here with my camera. All right. Hello, welcome to Axiom's webinar. Guys, we're so excited to have you today. Some of you I know are participants from the last couple of years. Some of you might have Googled us and are new to us, so we're very excited to have you here. Today, we are talking about labor optimization. Now, we say it's solving your staffing challenges of today. Look, no magic pills here, no magic wands. This is just the beginning of some steps that we're going to talk to you guys about in ways that you can really manage the optimization part of labor for your locations. Now, in December the 9th, we had a webinar, myself and Bob Clements, our CEO and president. We talked about the 2022 workforce management retail trends. And we said we would be talking about 3 of those concepts really more in depth starting right now, today in January. So hello, and I'm Robin Merritt, an Executive Vice President for Axiom. I've been a part of the webinar since we started back in 2019. We've had several guests along with Bob Clements, our CEO and President. And today I'd like to welcome Michael Clements. Okay, no, it's not really Michael Clements. So as you can see, we don't have Bob Clements with us today. Unfortunately, while on vacation, he was wrestling an alligator and he pulled something in his back. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. He was working on an algorithm and pulled something in his back. That'd be more like it. So we'd like to welcome his stand-in today with a little more hair. And that is Mr. Michael Gondak. Hi, Michael.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Michael Gondak. I'm a Vice President for Sales for North America at Axiom, and I can assure everybody that no alligators were harmed in the making of this webinar.
Oops, I forgot to say that. You're right. Absolutely. So, all right, today's webinar is going to continue on that theme that we talked about, and that's managing through the labor crisis that you have in front of you. And the reason I kind of joke a little about it is that I mean, we really thought this was a discussion we were going to have over 2020, 2021, not 2022, and not to the impact that you have today. So we're going to continue on that theme of, how to do more with what you have in front of you, not how to do more with less. Now, in the last years, think about this, your impact, not going to tell you anything you haven't experienced. These are the things that have really impacted you, so you'll know where we came up with these topics and where our customers that we've been working with on. So in the last 2 years, you've had, and beginning into the 3rd year of this disruption, first it was COVID. And then the impact was I don't have any products, so I have an inventory shortage. And then all of a sudden I have a whole new shortage with labor because I have Omicron that came in. And you've got all of this compounding on top of it. And I mean, to date, it has just been so much, I think, so much on you guys and so much every day having to think about challenge after challenge. We've kind of just stripped away what optimization and labor look like. So in the next hour, Michael and I are going to say, let's drag it back into not what's right in front of you, but starting to think about what the future can look like and how you're going to make an impact into that labor optimization, right? Now, before we get there, we have some exciting news that we would like to share with you from Axiom. We are moving forward with 2 on-site forums. They were very impactful before COVID happened, and we already have people signing up for these right now. Later on, at the end of the webinar, we'll put the link in for you to go right to them. But first, to start off with, in New Orleans, I can say that, right? Michael, I kind of did that right. You're the better one at the
You kind of did it right, yeah.
Hey, I grew up close by, I can say it. In New Orleans, we have our first forum, and it's April the 20th and the 21st on site in New Orleans. It's going to be a sharing of information and knowledge. It's going to have customers. It's going to be some of our thought leadership. So take these webinars, make them live and in person, and make them more than just Bob and Robin or Bob and Michael or Robin and Michael. It's going to be really a very large amount of sharing of information and really talking about workshops, like how to session forward. So New Orleans in April, and then in May, if you have counterparts from your company and peers that are over in the UK, please have them sign up for the May 13th on-site forum at the Ascot Racecourse. Very excited about our opportunities moving forward. All right, so let's focus back to this webinar. Going to take a little journey. It's going to be our optimization journey. So Michael, why don't you kind of kick us off here for where we're going?
Yeah, sure. So today we're really going to focus on that labor optimization piece, right? And really we're going to break it down to that one big idea, right, of labor optimization. And to do that, we have to talk about each step in that process. So you've got forecasting, you've got workload generation, you've got staffing, you've got scheduling, and all of it is a lot to kind of comprehend. And it reminds me of that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So we're going to approach these one bite at a time, and we're going to go even further, right? Which is to explore the idea of making sure that you're getting the right person at the right time, in the right job, and talk about what associates are doing while they're on shift, because in order to meet your customer demand, each step of this is vital, and if any step goes wrong, the result is just a bad schedule.
Just a bad schedule. That's all, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So these steps, I was going to ask you this optimization, scheduling, big concepts, and I'm glad you broke it down, right? Which is it's taking one bite at a time, and I think that's what our steps do for us, right? That if you think about it holistically, sure, you could make a list that goes on for several pages that include all the things that you need to do, but right now, I think if you took these steps that are in front of you, so write these down, think about them, and then we're going to go into depth under each one. And then at the end, we're going to tell you what we do from our perspective, the way our teams are built to help you in these particular areas. So, all right, so now that we've got the overview, let's get into the first one, demand forecasting. This one is quite the introduction, or quite the concept, because I feel like we walked away from forecasting as what we knew, right? What we've really built up and learned over time with forecasting, we kind of walked away with it. So Michael and I would like to know from a poll, what are you guys doing? So you'll see a poll that should come up in front for you. There you go. Now, how are you forecasting? We're forecasting in our current workforce management system, or our labor team is generating the forecast and it's outside of that system, or our finance team is doing it and they're providing us with the forecast, or a combination, like maybe labor management and operations are working with finance and they're forecasting, or you're just not using forecasting tools at all. It's really just a spreadsheet. We're doing it outside of our workforce management tool, and we're just trying to get, whether it's an hour or a revenue, whatever the target is, to the stores on either a daily or weekly basis. So Michael, I'm curious about these, right? Because I know there's a lot of change happening right now.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of change, and I think that a lot of the disruption that's occurred, and really the continual disruption, right? And we talk about things being the new normal, but in a way, I think thinking about things as the next normal is oftentimes pretty advantageous as well. And so adapting your forecasting processes and your forecasting methodologies to adapt to that next normal is really going to be the key to to growth and stability.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I was in the stores. I was a store manager, and I mean, I wasn't bad at forecasting. I wasn't bad at that, but I definitely doing things outside of a system, right? I mean, yeah, I get it. I'm old. We didn't have systems back then, but we did have a tablet and some chalk, and we made it work, right? So I know that the forecasting methodology is there, and we have a lot of people that can do it in a spreadsheet. So, I mean, I know that's where we're going is we had to stop. We had to just kind of make do with what we had in front of us. So now where we are today, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if the poll is ready yet. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so that's great. Like 55% are actually forecasting in their workforce management system. I think that's huge to see that that's almost 3 years after the pandemic that's happening, that's where it is. We still have 23% forecasts that are not forecasting, and then about 18% that are a combination, both finance and labor outside of the system. and then the a few that are generating it, just outside of not using a tool at the labor team. I think we also had a quick question of, are you asking if schedule forecasting or labor budgeting is forecast? Yes, but no, really we're talking about the labor budgeting forecasting. So, okay, so starting there, Michael, I'm thinking about this poll, the 55% that are using their workforce management tool, yay, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's great, because it really does identify that, that there's trust in systems. However, as we look to the future, and as we look to the way that, that people have forecast in the past, there are certain limitations with those traditional methods of forecasting. So, questions like, is the past an accurate representation of what the future holds? Those are the sorts of questions that organizations are beginning to ask. And while 55% are using WFM systems, that tells me too that 45% are not. And so, because I'm good at math, and so so when we think about those sorts of things, what are those obstacles to being able to really trust in a WFM system, to do this forecasting for the future?
Yeah, and I have talked to several of our customers who went back to using their systems, but not in the same way they were, right? It was definitely just trying to get something back into a system to create some sort of a budget, right? To begin with, getting their labor budget in place. What I do know is I've talked to many customers who have said they're not using machine learning at all. Basically, that definitely turned off, if they were even turning it on. Remember that machine learning came into play, and since you're good at math, was it 2017? Was it 2018? I mean, I remember at NRF, there was a floor on AI, robotics, and retailers were trying to figure out where they fit into machine learning. Because remember this, guys, machine learning is just a branch or a part of artificial intelligence, right? It's really the area that focuses on the use of data and algorithms that imitate what we do, like learning, but it gradually gets better and better and better and more accurate and more accurate and more accurate. Like when I was a store manager, I knew that I could write a good schedule because I'd been in that store for over a year. I knew what Wednesdays looked like. I knew what Saturdays looked like. I knew who wanted to work when. But I didn't learn after a certain extent because I was moving on. I had other things to do. So I didn't keep learning about machine learning. That's funny. But I didn't keep going and getting more data. I'm like, yeah, I got enough data. That's good. I can make a schedule. Let's move on with it, right? So I guess we know what machine learning is. Everybody heard it. It was out there. You can use some short-term forecasting, long-term forecasting. This is really about predicting the future. But I mean, I think there's more to it, right? What goes all into machine learning?
Yeah, well, data. So, when we think about, again, your experiences as a store manager, right, there's a limited amount of data that a person can consume, right, before it doesn't become useful for them anymore. But, machine learning works the opposite way. And that the more data that you can provide it, the better it operates. So with your traditional forecasting methods, right, you take your volume drivers, right, your input variables, right, you apply it to a forecasting model, exponential learning, smoothing, et cetera, and it generates an output. Right, but the model itself is fixed, right? And we think about that from a fixed perspective of, close enough, right? It's close enough that we're going to apply those inputs to it to come with the output that we want. Machine learning takes that on its head. And what essentially you do is you train the system to take those inputs, and it generates the model for you. And the reason that that's important is because it's not a close enough model, right? It's not a model that's, that 80-20 rule that we hear about all the time. It takes your actual volume inputs and the way that they relate to each other and the weighting of each of the various components to it. It looks forward and backwards, and it begins to understand what your data looks like and how your data interacts with itself to generate the model. You then use that model to apply your inputs for the future. So if you think about it, that model is really something that is unique to your particular business, particular locations within your business. All right. And that's what leads to machine learning forecasts being 20, 25, 30% more accurate than traditional forecasting methodologies, because you don't have to rely on the close enough model.
Which I thought was great when I was in the stores. I was pretty close, right? I can only imagine. And I think about it though, I can only imagine what a better customer experience, employee experience that I could have created by having more data, more information. I do remember having like an aha moment when I was I had a group of stores that were in LA and they were in the city. And I'd really had a few brands that had been in the city, but these were literally in the financial part of the city. And of course, where do you staff? You got to protect Saturday and Sunday. Well, no one is in the financial district on a Saturday and a Sunday in these particular stores. We were overstaffed then only because it was my natural inclination of, sure, you got to staff your Saturday, protect your Saturday. Well, guess what? Wednesday was their biggest day they would ever have in a week. And if there was a holiday, the Wednesday before the holiday was going to be like your Friday or Saturday. So all of a sudden we kind of turn it upside down. As soon as we got our workforce management system in place, we all just that aha moment of, oh, and we ended up even closing on Sundays. And that was unheard of back then, right? You just don't, close the store on Sunday. So I think that, so we get all this information, we get the data, you learn a lot from it. What we want to make the point we want to make here is, whether you are using a system, not using a system, whether you're using finance and labor in your labor operations team together, no matter what you're doing right now, it is time to stop, take a deep breath, and look at the future of your forecasting. Now is the time to take advantage of the tools that you have available to you. If you're using a system that has machine learning, now is the time to turn it on if you're not using it. And the reason why is because of all the things that Michael just said. The consistency and the constant learning is by far anything more than you can ever do manually. You've got to trust that the historical data, the information will at some point begin to be your norm, right? We're 3 years in, guys. This is your norm. Disruption is your norm for a while. Now start using that data so that you can be able to forecast. So the next thing that we're going to do, and the next thing we're going to talk about, is workload generation. And you'll see, and I know you guys all know this, you're very smart in workforce management, that's why you're here, but you all know that these are compounded. What we're trying to do today is just to remind you, and then we'll show you how we can help. So machine learning, it never stops learning, and it never stops thinking about ways to be better. That's just the whole goal of machine learning. And your forecast is the backbone, foundational element, whatever you want to call it. It is the core of the success moving forward. Michael, anything else around this area?
Yeah, it really just is. I think you really just hit it on the head, which is, really the key to, and we're going to get toward this at the end, but really that key to employee engagement even is an accurate forecast, right? Because you want to make sure that the people are there and that they're busy and that they are working when you need them to work and they don't burn out. And really the key to beginning that whole thought process is making sure that you have an accurate demand forecast that you can then, generate your workload off of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You ready? We're going to go to number 2. Okay, number two, workload generation. Start us off on, I'm sure everybody knows what it is. It's workload generation.
Sure. Yeah. So that second step, right? You now have that demand. You now need to turn that business demand into a labor forecast. And this really centers around two major concepts. One is the labor model and labor model updates, and the second is a labor model drift. Okay.
So let's start with first the labor model, right? And I know everybody knows it again, but think about this, that when you say what a labor model is, so when you talk about all the combination and interaction of what is in a labor model, your labor standards, you've got your workload drivers, you've got store profiles, location data, you've got jobs, staffing requirements, you put it all together, you get the calculation, you get the output, and then you get your expected workload, right? what of all of that has changed in the last 3 years? I guess I should ask, what has not changed in the last 3 years? So if you think about that workload up your labor model workload, if you think about the update of the labor model, you might have done pieces of it, but did you think of it holistically as a real labor model? I guess so. Let's start there, right? That's your labor model. That's the piece of it. You've got new roles that you've created. Existing roles have changed. You've got new job tasks, some that started, some that have ended. Have they ended in the modeling? Like you got to kind of just start there and then move through the next steps when you think about workload generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second idea is this concept of labor model drift, which I know we discussed in our last webinar, the focus for 2022 for workforce management with 3 key concepts. So just as a quick review, labor model drift happens, right? It happens naturally. So your labor model that you measure is static, right? But your labor in your stores is dynamic. So small changes, new technologies, new processes, new customer buying habits, that changes your labor need over time. So remember in the last webinar, and we don't need to repeat it here, but in the last webinar, we discussed the fact that your labor model may drift 3 to 5% in a normal year. And what that means is that your labor spend or your labor productivity is off by 3 to 5% within a year after your model was developed. Well, now let's add things like COVID. Let's add things like new processes. Let's add things like, absenteeism. Let's add all of these disruptive changes that have occurred and that we've all experienced in the last 24 or 36 months. And we can see how much your labor model may have drifted on top of that normal 3 to 5%.
The other thing as a part of this, which is the workforce design, has impacted this as well, right? So when you think about what is the workforce design or redesign, is the transformational piece that's been happening over the last 3 years. So I said earlier, new jobs, new roles. So in the beginning, there was this need of, we've got to get a COVID role, sanitation role, whatever the name of it was, right? I've got to get it in. I got to get it in right away. So you get it in. It's a new job. It's assigned to people. That's all they do. Now, where are you today in that? Is that still going on in the stores? Is it still needed? Is it relevant? What about other things that have come out of that? And what about the role that I played in 2017, 18, and 19? Is that still the same role I play today? And so transformationally, things have been happening in the workforce with your employees. So for us, we are sitting at home, we are remote. For our frontline workers, they're not sitting at home, they're not remote, but their jobs have changed, you guys, and you know that. And instead of just thinking about, we've got to create a shift or a pattern, or you've got to think about your workforce and what they need. And Michael, back to your engagement point, you got to start talking to them. You've got to start talking with them, not at them. So at them is, this is what you do. You need to hear what the employee is. This is what I really do, right? So really, it's about the transformation of what's happening in the stores. Now you have to take that information. You have to now look at your workforce, because that's going to help you build your labor model. And Michael, like what we used to be able to do is think about a labor model. We have an exercise. We get our standards right. We got the new jobs right. Here's all the things that we're going to do. You set it. You don't really visit again until something happens. We want to recreate an organizational structure, or, oh, hey, we're adding new technology. And then you think about it. That cannot happen any longer. You are not at that place anymore. You now have to think about always redesigning.
That's right. Remember, labor models don't need to be complex. They just have to be accurate, right? They don't have to be an elephant.
Oh, well, that doesn't really go with our theme very well, but thank you. Okay.
Yeah. I'm hungry.
All right, guys. So now we're into shift generation. Seems very tactical. I know every one of you on here that do this every day are going, I'm not so sure why I'm on a webinar talking about shift generation. I'll tell you why, because we started to talk to our customers about what they were doing that was different. And we had a couple of customers that we worked with that we started to challenge to say, why don't you look at your shift length? Literally, it's about the length of your shift. Is it too long? Is it too short? Is it not the right And again, is it not right for the employee? What's the voice of the employee telling us back at this point? I think what I'm really saying here, Michael, is you really need to decide, just because in my workforce management tool, it said that I had a 4-hour shift link, and that's the shift link we use for this role. Is it really the shift link that's right for that location, that employee group, that new role, the jobs that are now required? Like, seriously, how are we now starting to think about shift links differently?
Yeah, definitely. So really the key components around that, number one, are listening, as you mentioned, listening to employees and understanding things like full-time, part-time mix, preferences. When do people like to work? But there's also regulatory issues that need to be taken into consideration as well. There might be collective bargaining issues that need to be taken into consideration. These vary by location. They vary by retailer. And shifts in an urban setting may be different from shifts in a suburban setting. What sort of break placements do you need to take into consideration? What's your thresholds for overtime? All of these need to be taken into consideration, but working with employees and working with the employee voice to make sure that those shifts that are being created are those that really fit with their expectations.
Look, it's all the don't talk at, talk with. It's the communication, the two-way. It might seem redundant that I say it in each category, but I mean, now I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. It's this engagement. And I know if Mr. Bob was here, it's one of the things that we talk a lot about with employee engagement. Engagement is overused in a lot of ways. And you've got to boil it down to what it really is. Your employee comes to work for you. They're there every day. Why not ask them, what do you like or not like about, do you like working at an 8-hour shift? Would you rather have a 10-hour? Because remember, if somebody's in a location that's downtown and it's in an inner city and they have just a lot of access to any kind of public transportation, they might be perfectly fine with, I can work a 10-hour shift. I have buses every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, but I live out in the suburbs. Now that doesn't feel so conducive. I am way out here for 10 hours. I'd rather do shorter shifts, or maybe it's just the opposite, but you won't know unless you add the question and you ask and you have a two-way dialogue. So I just think it's so important in this area with retention. And then think about that change management. When you start your change management journey, how less that will be, meaning how much work that you have to do will be less because you've already had this communication dialogue. You've already started this. They already know that you're listening to them, and the change you're making is on their behalf. Of course, it's good for the company and it's good for the productivity, but you're also listening to what they have to say. And I know along with that, training is a big part of it as well, Michael.
Oh, training is a huge part of it, and you hit the nail on the head earlier that sometimes the word employee engagement gets kind of chucked around as is the sort of this catch-all basin. But when we think about training is really the key to employee retention and engagement. There's been quite a bit of research out there that shows that if you train employees on anything with regards to their growth, not just the things that they need to do their job, but if you give employees, let's say, management training, a lot of organizations think, well, if I teach them how to be a manager, maybe they're going to go to my competitor and they're going to be a manager over there.
Right.
But the fact is, the research shows this just not true. If you allow employees to grow their skills, and you are the ones who are providing them with those opportunities to grow their skill, the research shows they stay because you're investing in them, you're showing that you believe in them, and employees feel this need to be loyal. So really giving them training that's outside of whatever they need to do specific to your organization to do their job, that actually is perhaps the greatest factor in employee retention, especially in a turbulent workforce.
Yeah, and don't forget that the digital workplace goes beyond just work, right? Social media is everywhere. And I think about Reddit and some of the other sites that you go to, and it's really a lot of frontline workers discussing topics of the day. And when you talk about shifts and shift links, and the funny thing is when an employer does something for them, they talk about it. It's funny that they think about, oh, it's just a frontline worker, they're part-time, they probably aren't even really here for the long haul. It doesn't matter. They're invested when they're there, and they share with their peers what's happening. So if you were to offer to them a brand new digital workplace that they get to have some two-way dialogue and they're answering surveys and you're seeing results from the surveys, they actually share that. That's things that they actually talk about. So it goes a long way, in other words. All right. So now we've got everything set. We've refreshed our labor model. We've generated the right workload. Now we've done some shift patterns. We've looked at where people are working, how long they're working. And now we're ready to assign the folks to it, or the coverage piece of it that we have. So Michael, why don't you start us off on this?
Yeah, sure. So oftentimes we get asked, how do we then assign shifts to employees? And I think that's the number of people that we have on this webinar is pretty much correlates with the number of different ways that people assign employees to different shifts, right? You can do it manually. You can run auto schedules. You can have employees select their own shifts. You can assign across locations or within a single location, et cetera, et cetera. Department managers, store managers, et cetera. There's a million different ways to do it. But what's important is that the methods that you choose are consistent with the culture of your organization. Because employees expect certain things, and they expect the system to be able to work with them in order to make these assignments.
Yeah, and this is again if you talk with, create the atmosphere and the culture that you can grab some dialogue from these folks, they'll give you that information right away. You don't have to really think about it, because there's things that I would do in my workforce management tools with this.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Because you also have to remember that employees have choices. Workers have choices now, we'll say, right? And the number of people in the gig economy has exploded. There's a recent study that showed that 5-10 years ago, I think it was, only 35% of the people who are in the gig economy were there by their own choice. Right? Maybe they got downsized and they just ended up in it. Well, now that number is at 65%. So think about it. A majority of people who work in the gig economy because they want to, and that's your competition for labor. And so when you think about how do workers in the gig economy get their work, and how are they assigned their work, and those concepts of self-selection, you can apply some of these concepts into your workforce management tool, whether they be shift boards or shift marketplaces, or swapping or time off request approvals, et cetera. You need to compete with with the opportunities that workers have outside of traditional employers, because that's where your competition is.
Yeah, that's right. And going back to leveraging mobile and that digital workplace here, I think about shift swapping, cross-door scheduling. I actually was really talking to a customer it was Australia, but we were talking about they're in a center with how many other retailers that are also struggling with covering their stores and the shifts that they have. And they went to just saying, we did a base schedule and now there's 100-something shifts, go for it. And while they still, especially right now in the Great Resignation and trying to get coverage, and because of the Omicron where a lot of people were out sick, they absolutely still had open shifts, but not near what they would if they wouldn't have let the employees pick up some of their own shifts in the shift marketplace, right? And the other thing that we were talking about was this great big idea that I know sounds scary, but I think it sounds scary because people don't know the infrastructure around it, or how to get it done, which is how many other retailers are in your center, in the mall, and you have how many people working for you. I'm a pharmacy, you're a bookstore, we've got Starbucks, we've got another restaurant. You're all working for the same thing, which is to hire all the same people. Why not get together and find out how do we share employees, not among our own brands, but among each other in a center? Keep them coming to the same place, and they might all want to work from 9 to 5. I don't have any 9 to 5s to give them, but one day a week, you've got 3 you could give them. Somebody else has 2 they could give them. There you go. They're working 9 to 5 in retail in one center that they come to every day. So I know that's a big idea. I know but guys, we talked about this about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, thinking about something like this with a work jam or with your vendor tools inside of workforce management. That was such a faraway idea. Is it really? Is it really a faraway idea anymore? I'm going to tell you that this leveraging mobility is one of the most important things that can make you successful, that can actually help with your retention, engage your employee, talking with them, not at them. It is the essence and the center of assigning and shift coverage, giving them the autonomy, take it away from you, giving them that ability. Anything else there?
No, I think you covered it at this point.
Okay, thanks. So shift assignment coverage. Now, the very last one, they're there. They're working, you got it coverage, you've got the coverage, they're on site with you, they're at work. Employee productivity. So kick us off here, Michael, on some of the things that they can focus on here.
Yeah, right. Some of the key areas to focus on are our task management. What are those specific tasks that need to occur, and how are you going to assign and track those? The concepts around continuous improvement, right? I mean, there's this is not a one and done kind of initiative that organizations follow. Training, and then of course change management, and change management being really critical to organizations being able to implement changes like this.
When you've got the audience and they're actually at work, right? It's the time that, what is it that I say? You don't talk at them, you talk with them. This is the time to start communicating with them. For instance, you've implemented a task management solution, or you're thinking about it, or you're on paper-based, or you've got some way or another that you are holding the stores accountable to get things done. So there's tasks happening in the store. You at headquarters, or you as the RVP or the district manager, might think things are happening. But how do you know? How are you measuring? How are you ensuring? Oh, well, we send the checklist at the end of the day, whether we did it or not. That's great. Completion. You're measuring completion. What about along the way? It was too hard. It had, I didn't have the right tools. You said to do this, but I couldn't do it because I was out of inventory. Like, where's that feedback part of task management? So this, again, I would encourage the employee voice, continuous improvements. So there are certain things you need to be better at. If you haven't updated POS systems, if inventory management is very difficult, backroom management, where the stock goes, how to get it to the floor, if you're touching merchandise 4, 5, 6, 7 times, you automatically know that those are things that have to get better from a process standpoint. What about the things you don't know? I did doing some labor standards and some studies at a C-store, and they did not realize how much time it takes to count back change, coins, rather than using the dispenser, buying the machine that just dispenses the coins. So we did this survey, this standard, the standard survey, and we started to watch and observe, and we said, how much time you could save and how much money? It was in the millions that you could save in productivity, but that you should have seen the employees go, I don't have to account change anymore. Oh my God. You would think that's very small. It was huge for them. Every day, all day, almost every customer using cash in the C-store, this is what I do. So this engaging piece of it, in my opinion, is really, really important. And I know continuous improvement it's more than just the discussion, right? There's other ideas around it.
Yeah, you need to review, right? And I think that's really that key component is when you start to implement these changes, to be able to review them, to measure, and assess, right? Have the changes that we've put forward, is this contributing positively to our organization? Is this contributing positively to our business? And then allowing you to then use that feedback and use that feedback loop to implement new and updated processes. So it's by looking at it continuously and not as anything ever having really a start and end time, that really allows organizations to grow, especially in times of turmoil.
Yeah, absolutely. And then training. That's a continual theme as well, as the training. And it's really important, again, that you guys are really thinking about new ways to train, new ways to survey, new ways to communicate with your employee. I can't say it enough because I've seen the success of the digital workplace. I know that for a lot of people, it's one more thing I can't do right now. The ones that are using it, the experiences the employees are having, launching a digital workplace, no matter what your tool is, it is so incredibly important. And the successes that we are seeing, it's tremendous what the employee feels in terms of ownership and being part of the company. And that goes a very long way. So training in all of the things that you're doing, you can't just roll out continual improvements and expect that you're going to get the ROI that you were attaining to, or that you built a business case around, by not training, not engaging, and not thinking about the change. All of it has to happen with change management and training in place. So those are the steps, you guys. Michael, thank you so much for today and stepping in. Now, I guess at this point, we did have a great question from one of our most esteemed guests that are always with us. Mike Fargo is always here, always asking questions and really challenging us. And I loved his questions. I loved his question because he said, so tell me exactly, how is Axiom validating labor models? So let's talk about how Axiom can help, because I think in the first one, we can probably address that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, we look at that journey that we've talked about, that first bite of the elephant, so to speak, is in that demand forecasting, right? And so, really the keys to it are benchmarking your forecasting accuracy and evaluating machine learning and artificial intelligence. And Axiom has a team, right? We have a team of people who can help you do this, who can help you go through this process, so that you're not trying to take it alone.
Right. And I think to Mike's question now on the second piece of it, our industrial engineers are built for that, are built for labor model assessments, refreshes, builds, like starting from the ground up if you wanted to. And it starts with building foundational elements of your labor standards. What drivers are you using to create the labor model? What are all of the location at the profiles, the aspects of it? So I think in this particular area, it's the use of our team of industrial engineers that do this day in and day out, that utilize our tool Opus, the one where we have a standards database, we have your standards, we have what if scenarios, and we have an easy way that we integrate in with your workforce management tools. So from the very beginning, we can take an existing labor model that you have, and then we can go in and decide which areas to take a look at, from either labor standards, processes, surveys with the employees, doing observations in the stores, just questionnaires and interviews overall. So that's how we would actually start the labor model validation. The other one that, the next area that we talked about, Michael, was the shift generation.
Yeah, and with shift generation, right, when trying to generate optimized shifts, there's two ideas, right? There's the idea of just because you can doesn't mean you should, and just because you should doesn't mean you can, right? So you need to sort of be able to balance all of these things as far as regulatory requirements, as well as your own employee preferences. And again, that same team of consultants can really help you through that journey.
Absolutely. That team also will start talking with you about shift coverage. You guys know all about this area. This is just a way for us to be able to evaluate, take a look at what you're doing, maybe challenge you, and then help with the actual implementation of it. And then our last one, here at work.
Yep. Finally, when you're at work, right? Task management, to identify that what sort of tasks are required, as well as a full comprehensive change management program. Really going from user adoption to user enablement of all of these changes that you're looking at.
Absolutely. So last, please come join us again for the next webinar where we talk about mastering the omni-channel. That's on February 24th. So please join us then. Join us on site in New Orleans or in the UK, or both, whatever you'd like to do. Just get there. That's all we care about. I think in the chat, we have now the link for axiomgroup.com/events. You can go there and register. We're already seeing registration begin for the US forum, and people excited about getting into New Orleans again and being live and in person. I want to thank all of you for your participation, for your questions. This is very meaty. It's a lot of information here, guys, so I appreciate you hanging in. Now, as Michael steps in, he's also our Vice President of Sales, guys. So myself and Bob and Michael and many others at Axiom are here to help you. So give us a quick email, drop us a line if you've got ideas for webinars, or if you just want to engage on some thought leadership. So we are excited again to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. Everybody have a wonderful day, and we wish Bob the best as he's out there wrestling his algorithms, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thank you.